All right, I'll say that is maybe good to go. Hang on a second here. There we go. Perhaps if the headset cable wasn't wound wildly around the boom mic on the headset, that would work a little bit better. All right, I think we got it. So, hello, everybody out there. OdatNurd here for another Sublime Text live stream. And I have absolutely doodly planned for this evening. Oh, as a matter of fact, I totally didn't hide the thing that I thought I did. That is unfortunate. Here, let me fix that. Da-da-da. Boop. There we go. Yes, I have not really given much thought with all of the stuff that has been going on this week. I haven't really given much thought to what I might do on the stream before it actually started. So I have an idea for stuff I'd like to sort of play with a little bit. So I think today is going to be very much just a random Sublime package development kind of operation. And this is sort of, oh, pardon me, based around a question that was asked on Stack Overflow where a user wants to do something, and we had a little discussion about it in the unofficial Discord, and never really came up with a satisfactory answer. So I thought I'd just play around with some stuff and see what we have going there. And I guess I should probably save this as something. I'll save it in my home directory as that and close this window so we don't need to know about it. And here's just standard override audit, but I don't think we're going to be needing that either. So let's just go ahead and, well, you know what? Yeah. Should we? Maybe we could just close the project in that one, I suppose, set up a nice split window. So here's the general idea of what we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to officially start the video by saying, hello, fellow Sublime Text Fanatics, OdatNurd here, and welcome to today's live stream for November 26th, 2019. And this is going to be, I think, the last live stream of November, and this is leading us into December, which starts, if I remember correctly, on on Sunday, wherein I really have to decide what my Devember project is going to be. I'm still waffling on it a little bit. So for the next day or two, if you have a fantastic idea for a Sublime Text package and it's within my realm of knowing what it is, how to do it, then that might be the thing that I do. There's a couple of ideas I have. I'm still waffling between trying to sort of use Sublime to drive a text-based game of some sort and creating a package to allow me to manage my YouTube channel or just work with YouTube in general, such as being able to find videos and playlists on the channel for generating links and maybe even editing the descriptions of videos and stuff like that, which I think might be a little bit tricky because I think in order to do that, you need an access token that requires an OAuth login, and there's not really a good way to do that in Sublime. So I'm not entirely sure how all of that would shake out. But if it came down to the idea of working on that kind of package, then I don't think I'd be live streaming my development of it just because it's going to be a lot of not really developing things in Sublime so much as reading web pages and researching and that sort of action. So that is something that could happen there. And maybe there'll be a game, in which case I would stream the game development. And if I can come up with another idea for a Sublime package, I would stream that as well. So we'll just have to wait and see. Depending on the topic, the daily devlogs, because Devember requires you to work at least 1 hour a day and then make the code publicly available if you produced any, and also generate a devlog of some sort. Last year I did vlogs until I got super sick and couldn't talk very much. So I might do vlogs, nightly vlogs again. One of the sort of quote unquote finger quote arguments against doing this as a live streaming thing is that keeping up a constant monologue of what you're working on can sort of slow down the workflow a little bit. Which would be extra bad for something where I didn't actually know at all what it was that I was going to be doing. The 30 days, or the 30 hours, 31 hours, I guess, 31 days in December might not be enough. We'll worry about all of that later. But today we're going to just work on some random stuff. So let's go ahead and get on into that. Now there's a question that a user had on Stack Overflow, which is actually sort of a trail on of another question that they had earlier in the week, which was essentially trying to do something in Sublime where when you open a file of a particular type, it unencrypts the file into the buffer for you to work on, and when you save, it re-encrypts as it saves the file to disk, and it sort of persists the password that's being used in that case, so that you only get asked when you open the file and not when you save it. And we talked about this a little bit. There are some we talked about this a little bit in the unofficial Sublime Discord. There's not really a super great way to do this for this reason. If I was to type some stuff into this buffer, then we can see that it gets marked as being dirty because there are changes to this buffer. And the only thing that can mark this file as undirty, to mark it clean, is to save the buffer. The other way to do it is to say view.setScratch true, like so. If I could type, I might put my keyboard in a funky position here. Maybe that'll work a little better. There we go. And make sure that has the focus because I just bumped the mouse. And see, now that the view is a scratch buffer, then I can do whatever I want in here, and it's not being marked as modified. Unfortunately, as soon as you remove that, the modification buffer comes back, because really the only way to mark this buffer as definitely saved is to save the file. So that causes a little bit of a problem. And in override audits code for creating an override, we kind of get around this. If I do create override and pick, something like say this one, then if we did view.isScratch here, we'd see that it says true. This is a scratch buffer. And the reason this is a scratch buffer is because with the incremental diff functionality turned on, the incremental diff wants to show you the changes between your file and the file on disk. And because this is an override of a file that doesn't exist yet, there's no file on disk, so you end up with the gutter just showing you a solid green line, thinking every line has been added, which is what happens if you use package resource viewers command, and say we picked default in here instead of add line embrace, say we pick add line. It's doing the same sort of thing, but as I'm doing here, but because this file doesn't exist on disk, it's got that incremental diff functionality going on the side, which isn't something that I wanted in my own thing here. Why is that not? That's weird. Oh, I was already in that one. My bad. Okay. Unlike this one, I don't have that going on because my view is a scratch view, whereas this view, yeah, is a scratch view. But I think I did something a little bit extra there. Here's another thing that's different. If I undo in, whoops. If I undo in this one, all the changes go away, but in mine, they don't, which is nice. And once you make a change to this buffer, we'll see here right now, is this buffer scratch? Yes. As soon as I make any sort of change, then we see that the file is modified, and the reason for that is that this view is now no longer a scratch view, right? And even if I undo those changes, it still thinks it's modified. It's not really a good way that I found to be able to stop that from happening. If you watch the streams, then you saw me working with that. One of the things you can do is try to figure out what the previous command was so that you can see uh, whether or not you've undone back to the last thing that happened that modified the buffer. And in that case, you could go ahead and mark the file as being scratch again. But I was never able to technically get that working the way I wanted it to. And I'm not entirely sure what was going on. I might have been doing something a little bit wrong. Um, but in order to do something like load a file and based on its extension, decrypt it or something along those lines, then you have to handle the onload event in an event listener in order to know that a file is loading so that you can do something. And then what you would have to do is take the content of that and decrypt it or whatever and replace the content in the buffer with what it was that you decrypted so that you could see it. And at that point, the file would appear to be modified, even though technically it's not modified. And there's not really a way around that. And then when it comes time to save the file, when you hit the save key, you'd have to do something like track on pre-save that happens before the save takes place and um, encrypt the content of the stuff and stick it the into the view, let the save happen, and then once you're done in an on post save event handler, undo that and put it back to the way that it was prior to that change, which would again show the buffer as being modified. And additional to that, that means that at any point you could undo, and if you didn't undo too far, you'd undo back to the part where the buffer looked like it was uh, the encrypted version or what have you, which is also not technically that great of a experience overall. So that does make one wonder. Let me just change the direction that my headset fob is attached to my shirt so that it does not try to mute the microphone. Boy, it just really wants to hang the wrong way today for some reason. Whoops. Excuse me. How about if I do this? There we go. Okay. Give it a little half twist. That'll keep it happy. Okay, so how exactly would we actually solve this situation? Oh, pardon me. I have been bumping my headset quite a bit lately. Ruining a lot of video takes. And that is, hmm. Sorry, I'm just, looking at something in the unofficial Discord, where someone's syntax doesn't highlight something in a particular way. Oh, it's using branchy stuff. I'm not sure how that works, so I'm going to have to bow out of that operation. So, come on, man. That doesn't work, huh? Okay. The question then becomes, how do we actually... Oh, honestly. This one's really a horror show. I don't know why I don't know where my face is. Okay, let's reset all of that business. So, how could we implement something like this? I think we just sort of have to try and feel our way through and see what comes up naturally. And there's some stuff that I would like to try. Go ahead and close all of these buffers like so. Oh, and toggle minimap. Oops. I don't normally use the minimap, and so I don't like to have that present. So the original person who was asking this question was trying to crypt the files on disk, and he was having particular problems with it doing funky things. As a matter of fact, let us do something like this. If I was to click this button like so, and drag this over here, we can actually look at Stack Overflow. So switch between different projects, Windows and Sublime. It seems like the answer to that question is use the OS specific shortcut, but oops, decrypt on open, encrypt on save with Sublime. So here's an example of a plugin that this person has created. So let's go ahead and just drop this in, and we can maybe look at it and see as a starting point what's going on here. We'll go ahead and paste that in like so and save it as SO encrypt test like so, just so I'll remember what the purpose of that was. I'm just going to quickly click this and take it away so that flashing stops happening. That's someone talking in IRC. So what we have here, and if we look, if we resave multiple times, the file is resaved, i.e. re-encrypted. I tried to solve this with on post save and restore after a save. It kind of works, but then even if the file is saved and no change has been done, Sublime thinks the file is modified because unencrypted plain text has replaced the saved encrypted version of the file. Yeah, there's no way around that anybody in a Discord is aware of, and that includes John, the developer who was around tonight. And, usually when he's around and you're talking about something, then he'll give you some tips on that. And as an example of that, one of the other questions that this same person asked was a way to prompt for a password and hide the password prompt. Basically, we did window.show input panel. We do something like this. And empty text and none. We get this input panel, and what this person wants is to be able to type the password in here, but have this be stars or something, so that you can't actually see the password. And he was having a problem because one of the arguments here, I believe it's this one, on done, on change, on cancel, or on select. There's an on change handler that gets invoked every time the text inside of the input panel changes. And as a response to that, what he was doing is figuring out what the current password is and then replacing it with stars and calling show password again. And that would immediately recall show input panel, and there would be a Stack Overflow. Hello, Ashwin. Oh, better late than never. You totally missed me bumping my hand into my headset microphone for a number of times. It was particularly weird. I think I've forgotten how big my face is. I'm not sure what's going on. I've been having problems recording videos. I keep botching takes by waving my hands around while I'm talking and bumping into the headset thing. So what we're just working on here is a question someone had on Stack Overflow about being able to encrypt or decrypt a file when you load it, and the person has this sample plugin that's not quite doing what they want. And if you were on the Discord earlier, then you saw us talking about this a little bit in the package development channel, and everybody sort of came to the same conclusion that there are some problems with this that you just sort of can't get away from. So we're sort of tracing through this. So we're going to assume when you open a file whose name ends with crypt, then it runs the command prompt crypt with an action of decrypt. So prompt crypt command is going to ask you for a password, and when it's done, it's going to run whatever command was running at the point where you did that. So that would be the decrypt. So it would call the decrypt command, which is going to do some stuff. Let's actually try a little bit of this out. So we're going to need a file that actually has some text in it, aren't we? We'll add some lorem text, and I'm going to save this as sample.crypt in my home directory. And let's see what happens when I do that. It's asking me for a password. I'm going to say, yeah, sure, the default password is 2. I'm down. And that is the, super encrypted. It's even got characters that aren't technically visible. So, okay, now I'm going to close that buffer. Close without saving. And if we just jump to here, what was it that I actually called that thing? This is the sort of memory I have. Sample.crypt. So the file as it appears on disk is not correct. So that part's not actually doing what a person might expect it to do. Okay, so that means if I open it, it's going to ask me for a password, and it's going to do something funky again. Okay, so that we might need to work on this a little bit. Well, what are its use cases though? What do you mean exactly? The thing here that I find interesting from a Sublime perspective, and to test this, we would need to go to here. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll do this. I look at sample.crypt, for example. It's this just text, right? If I gzip sample.crypt, I end up with sample.crypt.gz. And if I open sample.crypt, hopefully I have my VI set up for this. Even though this is a gzipped file, it has opened uncompressed. And that allows you to look at the content of the file and edit it. And you might add some stuff in there. And when you write the file, it is actually if I said encrypt, I said that wrong. It's compressed. The name of that might be throwing me off. So it's actually modifying the actual file itself. So we can see this is a gzip file, and if I check it, it is a sample.crypt. It's a gzip compressed data file that used to be named sample.crypt, but now it's named this, and we can see its size is 302 bytes. And if I open sample.crypt.gz and delete those lines back out again, and make sure I don't actually, do that, it's still a gzipped file, and we see the size of it has changed from 447 to 451, and the file on disk has changed by 2 bytes. I use this, or at least I used to, this particular functionality all the time at work because we work on a system that generates ridiculously large log files, something on the order of 2 gigs uncompressed for one file in one day. And so as a result of that, we need to compress those files on the fly and to put them on disk, or we just completely run out of disk space because there's a large number of those things. We can chew through hundreds of gigabytes of drive in a day. And sometimes you need to look inside of one of those files in order to see what's going on, and it takes a long time to try and take a copy of a file that big. So being able to just look inside of it and see it compressed and maybe make a change and have the change sync back to disk compressed is sort of a neat idea. And I haven't had to do that in a while because at work I've been sort of switched off to doing some web related stuff instead. So yeah, and this is also the need for encrypting a text file. He didn't actually have something for that, but that is also something that VI does as well. If I did crypt test.text and add some text, if you use capital big H, a big X, oh, okay, yeah. We can see this file is like here. There is, and I said this on the Discord. Normally, X is for quitting VI, and big X asks you for a password and then crypts your file just to keep it secure. I don't know what kind of crypt mechanism that it uses, and I often accidentally hold down the shift key too long when I'm doing this. And then if I was to hit that and it's asking me for a password and I start typing some password in and hit enter, then I've just crypted my file based on uh, whatever command I was going to type in the shell next, and good luck getting it back because that encryption is hard to break. So the first thing I normally do when I install Vim on a new machine is immediately compile my own version of it and disable crypting so that doesn't happen. But the fact that this is a feature of VI, I think means that it's a common use case. I'm not entirely sure why myself. Certainly in VI, I think it just it uses some sort of, I don't even know what kind of encryption it uses, to be perfectly honest. And the person that asked the Stack Overflow question is going to use something fantastical. So I imagine the idea is just being able to have a file that's safe on disk, but that you can edit, which I think is only so plausible because if the file is in memory, theoretically anybody that could scoot through your memory could, get it. That gets into security mechanisms that are well beyond my pay grade, I will say. So there's a lot of potential problems with this. One is that it didn't actually do what a person wants, and I think the reason for that is when the on pre-save event is triggered, that's Sublime's way of saying, I am about to save this file. What would you like to do? And the answer here is, I would like to ask for a password and so I can encrypt a file. But that's too bad because after it falls off of the bottom of this, it saves the file anyway. That's why it ends up on disk unencrypted and this looks crypted in the buffer. So that is not a particularly good way to pull that off. We probably need to fix that first. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure what the best way to even pull that off is at the moment. Say you definitely need a password in order to do this, right? And the password has to be a number in this case. How might we pull something like this off? Well, one thing we might do is add extra lines between these because it upsets my delicate sensibilities to be able to do something like that. And if we had a crypted file, we could try to decrypt it on load and get that part working first, but we don't, so we'll have to try to bootstrap this by doing something in the save. So is there a way to block a save from happening? And the answer to that question is no. No, there's not. There's no way to stop a file from saving, and there's no way to stop a file from closing. You get the event that's telling you that it's happening, but you don't have any way to stop it. The only way to stop it from happening is to block the save command from doing anything at all, because if you don't run the save command, then Sublime can't do the save. But plugins can't prompt for a file name, only the save command can prompt for a file name. So if it was a file that never existed on disk before, like close without saving, like this, yeah. If the file just looked like this and this file doesn't have a name yet, which we could see by doing this, the file name is none, then the first thing that the save command does is ask you for the file name, and only when you select one does it actually do the save. So how would you actually prompt the user for a password prior to saving the file? I don't think there's a way to do that. I think you would have to let a new file be saved to disk automatically and then after it's saved, prompt for the crypt password and go from there. Or you're not allowed to. Another reason why this doesn't work. What if, in order to kickstart this operation, you had to choose a command from the menu or from the context menu to say encrypt this file, and that would cause it to be encrypted on disk. I think that's about the only way to do that, because then you could be asked for a password, and after the password is entered, and if the person enters the password, that would encrypt the file, right? But there's no way to do it otherwise, because without having the file saved to disk first. Yeah, let's think about that. If you said, I want to save this file, then you are prompted for the file name. After you choose it, a file name is chosen and the on pre-save event is triggered, but the file doesn't already appear on disk. But as I said previously, running a command in response to this is fine and dandy, but it doesn't stop the save from actually saving the file to disk. So while you're typing the password in that you want to use to encrypt your file, it's already on disk unencrypted, which is an issue unto itself. So I think what we're going to do very quickly here, just to make life a little bit easier in the short term, is save that and quit and restart so that the event listener isn't in place, so that we can save this as some sort of file in my home directory. We might call it, what, I don't know, crypttest.txt or something along that line. So it's just a standard text file. Now, what we need, and maybe we should actually move this thing into its own package, huh? That might be an idea too. Keep it all nice and segregated. So we might create a folder, name it, what? Encryptorizer. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that. If it'll let me, create that and move this file to, crap. There. Yes, move it here. Okay, and, oh, yeah, that's right. New file relative to current view, Python version. I'm going to assume, oh, maybe we don't want to do that. Yeah, well, let's do that. Okay, there we go. So if I quit that, restart, we end up with, did it plug in Encryptorizer? Yes, it did. Okay, and we're also going to say open package, Encryptorizer. All right, hang on a second. I forgot that opens it in a new window. That's an unfortunate turn of events, but that's okay. We'll just do this. There we go. Move that back over to the other side. Oops. Okay, there we go. So there's our little package going so far. And we're going to need a command to be able to encrypt this file by picking something from, say, the command palette or something. So how might we do that? And I think we want to say new file relative to current view, and we'll name it context.sublime menu. And it's going to be a menu file with an entry of caption of that. I think we should do this way first. And an ID of n, so it goes to the bottom of the menu. Whoops. And an entry for encrypt this file with, what did he call this thing? Encrypt, let's say. And does it need any arguments? I don't think it does. Okay. So just like that, oops, That's not a good place for the menu. The Python version file tells the plugin system what version of the Python plugin host the plugin is supposed to run in. In versions of Sublime that aren't the secret one that we're running that only people in the Discord know about, it always runs in Python 3.3 by default. But in the new secret magic builds, uh, you can choose between the 3.3 and the 3.8. So going forward, new packages should have the Python version file so that their packages are run in the new plugin host, because I think the magic is at some point they plan to discard the 3.3 Python plugin host just to not have two of them running all of the time, which is going to make older packages that have plugins in them break. I'm not sure what their plan is for that, but that's sort of the idea there. Okay, so there's our encrypt this file command. That's a new thing, by the way, so I'm trying to get into the habit of remembering to do that so that my plugins go in the new thing. Although all things being equal, I'm not enough of a Python guru to necessarily know what's different between Python 3.3 and Python 3.8, except that the number is bigger. And to a lesser degree, I was playing a little bit earlier with actually being able to do that thing with gzipping and ungzipping files, and it turns out there's a zlib encoder that would probably make that really easy, and it works only in Python 3.8. So if this works out, I can totally do a thing that I want to do. So an issue here is encrypt command assumes that there's a global password, which isn't a problem. So I think we should say password equals none here, like this. And then we could say if password is none, then we're going to do something a little different. Otherwise, we're going to let it fall through. And in fact, we might even say encrypting, good gracious, with that. And the password, and then comment this part out for the time being. Oh, and that's like totally broken, but that's okay. Yeah, there we go. Okay, what would we do here? We would say panel equals self dot view dot window dot show input panel, enter password default. That's the prompt default password of 2, and self.onDone is the place where the password is going to be invoked, and none and none. And then we're going to say panel.settings.set password true to hide the password, and then we're going to return like so. As a matter of fact, normally when I do this, I would do something like this, because I don't care what this command returns. Sublime doesn't care what it returns, and it makes that a little bit nicer. I'm not 100% sure if that is, finger quotes, Pythonic or not, but that's normally how I pull that off. So that should compile, and then we also need def on done, which is going to take self and password like so. That's getting a little irritating. Whoops. And we're going to say self.view.run command encrypt with a password of package dev is really broken right now. That's unfortunate. I'm totally used to doing that. I should probably be doing this in an older version or something. The arguments we're going to provide is a password, and the password is going to be that password. So in theory, when we choose this and we say we want to encrypt this file, it's going to ask us for the password. The default is 2. You can type all kinds of stuff in here if you want. If you push escape, nothing happens. You can see that there. But if I was to do it again and type, just hit enter, then the console says encrypting with 2. So we've now made this encrypt command require a password in order to invoke it. And if you run it and it doesn't have a password, then it asks you for one first. So with that out of the way, it's now theoretically safe to do this, where we would say gather a region that's the size of the entire file, get it as a substring, cipher it up, and then replace the entire content with it. So with that out of the way, if I did this and said encrypt this file with the default password, nothing happens. Ooh, look at that. This might be one of those things that works in version Python 3 and not Python. No, wait, no, this totally worked before, didn't it? Why does this not work then? Let's see. In run, in list comprehension, unsupported operands, int and stir. I'm not crazy in thinking that a second ago this was totally putting random crypty stuff in my buffer, am I? Because I'm pretty sure that I saw it doing that. That is intriguing. Let's do that one more time with that thing open. Well, I guess I can't do that. That definitely gets unhappy. Let's see. Print password is this. And okay, so if that was the case, then this should totally just say password is 2. Right, so why does this not work? Sometimes of all the things that you think are going to be a technical hurdle, the weirdest things are. Yeah, that's what I thought. Just verify, oh, that part's still doing what we expect. All right, so boop, that seems to do a thing. That's nice. So really the problem is this. Chur ord C plus password. Does this return something? What exactly is in run, in that, in the list comprehension? It would be nice if the stack trace said which part of this was unhappy. Oh. Did this work before? Because I don't think it did. Yeah, I'm just thinking, wait a minute, this is like, am I crazy, or did this not do something and give us weird funky output over here before? That couldn't have worked if the password was 2, right? Yeah, shouldn't it be something like this? Does this do a thing? I'm not entirely sure how that works. Well, now I'm just really creeped out. It should automatically be turned to a string, shouldn't it? Rapture ord C with stir. I think the idea of this is going to get the ordinal, add the weird password thing to it, then turn it back to a string. So that should already be a string, shouldn't it? What is this? Oh, so chur 65, capital letter A. Yeah, that looks like it's already a string when it comes out of there. That replaces the content in the buffer with it, but that's probably not necessarily what you want, though. What you actually want is for it to save the file to disk that way. This is where things start to get a little bit tricky. Because, yeah, this file is totally encrypted, but now what? You can't edit the thing. I presume doing this, you would want the file to be saved to disk. And if that's the case, we know it already has a file name because that might be a nice thing to do in here. Def is enabled. Let's say self.view.filename is not none. Okay. Just for the sake of clarity, because you don't want to have some random lorem text and then be able to encrypt it before it has a file name, let's say. Because if the encryption has to ask you for the password before it can do the save, then it has to make sure that there is actually a file name. And I think what we might do is save the content of this file to disk as a .crypt file. This really gets into a lot of funky edge cases. If the idea was to choose the command, I'm going to undo that. See, one thing is I can undo this back to the state of the file the way it was before the encrypt happened. So that's suboptimal. It's also suboptimal that this ends it up with new line characters and such. It's probably cooler to like add 65 or base 64 and code the result or something just to make sure that it all works out. But I shouldn't be able to undo back to the uncrypted file. So I guess you have to sort of decide at the start, do you want to be able to pick encrypt and have it encrypt this file to disk? And we could say that we just automatically create a crypt test.text.crypt file on disk and leave this text file open and associate so that every time we save this file later, it re-encrypts. That might be something to try. Let's see how that works out as an experiment. Okay, so let's say we don't need this part anymore because we know that part is working. So what we actually want to do is embarrassingly try to save a file to disk. So let's say we also need to import OS up here. And yeah, call me old-fashioned, but I don't like the way that these two things are on one line. But, that's just me. I think because the little default stub is always done it the other way. That's going to do that. That's going to do it. So we want to be able to save this to disk. So I guess we need, don't do a replace of this, let's say. Let's leave that part off. But we need a file name. Encrypted name is self.view.filename and this. Is that a thing? Oh, that's no good. Probably didn't need to do that way, did I? If it's just going to be a file name, I suppose it's probably smarter to just do it this way. Too used to working on folders as a whole. Okay, that's cool. Now how do you save a file in Python? With handle, with open. Oh, shoot. Encrypted name. We'll just do it as handle.write. Ciphertext, right? Something like that's going to do the job. I would imagine. And I suppose we should do this. This is all really crude code, but if there's an error, then that's bad for us. Well, that went poorly. Yeah, that's good. And otherwise, we might say self.view.settings.set cryptid name as cryptid name like this. So that we could do something like self.view.settings get cryptid name none. Whoop. Is none, like so. I guess maybe I didn't need to do it that way. So the idea is that if you pick this command and choose encrypt this file, then it'll ask you for the password. You enter the password. It encrypts the file to a disk file based with a name based on this one, which is totally going to clobber the hell out of an existing file, but one problem at a time. And then it'll set a setting in here to say that this has already been crypted. And in that case, the command won't be enabled anymore. So if I pick this and pick just the default password, then it seems to have maybe done something. Who can say? The command is now disabled. But I think I should be able to open crypt this one and open it Thank you. And we'll just go ahead and shuffle that down. So this is what the other one looks like. We'll turn on word wrap in that one so that it's possible to see it. So now that that happened, this is totally a thing, right? Now we can no longer encrypt this, but we should probably provide some indication to let someone know that this file has been crypted to explain why that is no longer present there. So for what we could do there is self.view.settings set. Oh, sorry, that's not a setting. Actually, yes. Crypt password is going to be the password that was chosen, so that we could re-encrypt again. And that is, one of those things we call a security hole because this password is plain text as far as anything is concerned. But I guess it really comes down to how much security you want. And you need to have a model of the thing that actually does something before you start thinking about how you could hide it. You could, for example, do some sort of crypting or MD5 summing of the password as you save it in the setting, and then make the person enter it again later and rehash it to make sure it's the same and all that good stuff. So say we actually have the password on. For this, we gonna have to say view.settings.erase the setting to make sure that this command is going to be enabled again. Whoops, I should probably have the actual thing focused. There we go. We saved that. And the other thing that we were going to do, what were we going to do here? We're going to say self.view.add. No, oh shoot, I can't remember. This is not something I use very often. So set status, that's the thing we want. Shift that over there. Okay, so set status, and we're already in the view, and the key we're going to use, I don't know, we'll call it crypt. I don't know where it's going to show up in there, but I don't know that necessarily matters. And we can say encrypted like this. Okay. So if we were to come over to here, choose this, pick that, hit the thing, it reloaded that file. And as long as this one has the focus, it says encrypted down there. So you know that this is a file that has been encrypted, but that's the only file that has that particular thing. And this also remembers the name of the file that it originally was crypted to down here. So with that in place, what we could do is say, we'll make a whole new class for this, just so we can leave that version there for the time being. Crypt load save listener. Yeah. This could actually be a view event listener so that it only triggers on things where we care about it. That might actually be a better way to go with this, I think. But that does require me to quickly check something. So, whoops. Class method is, oh, class, sorry. Is that how that works? Class method? Yeah. Is applicable and settings. Return settings has crypted name. And we want something for on post save, like so. That's not going to need anything, and we can just go ahead and say the unencrypted file was changed. Now that I've typed all of that and it compiles, let's see how close I got to how that actually works, because I totally did that from memory. Class method that receives a settings object and should return a bool indicating if this class applies to a view with those settings. Hey, check that out. Oh, I'm some sort of memory genius for 2 seconds. On post save. There we go. Call after review has been saved. Now here's something else we can just going to throw in here real quick. This should check if the file name changed or bad things could conceivably happen, or at least unexpected ones. Okay, so with that in place, now that I've done that, if I hit this, an unencrypted file was changed. So every time we save this file, that one could theoretically be saved. So now all we have to do is say self.view.run command, and the command to run is crypt. And we need to pass it arguments. And the arguments we need to pass it is a password. And the password we want to pass it is self.view.settings.get a crypt password, like so. So that loaded. So if I save this, theoretically something's happening, but I guess in order to check, we'd have to do something like this. And do we see that file reloading? No, we don't. Okay, well that's unfortunate. So, I guess technically, this is not working due to the smartness of crap. This command isn't running because we specifically told it it's not enabled if there's a crypted name in the view. So not only does that disable it here, it also means you can't run command it as well. So I don't know, maybe we could add a force equals false here or something. And here we could add force equals false. And force is false or this. Does this do what we want? This command is only enabled if there's a file name and force is set to, excuse me, true, or there's not a cryptid name. Okay, so I think that should still do that. But now if I save here, anything? Anything? No? Maybe I should double check that this is doing what I think it's doing. Trying to do a thing in a place. Okay. So that's not doing squat. Can you not run commands? Maybe if I actually use the correct file name, it would work better. That sounds like a plan, huh? Yeah. Anything now? No? Not even going to pretend, huh? Hmm. That's interesting. Oh, you know what else would be cool? If I added that force password, that force thing, and set it to true so that the command would actually enable itself. See, sometimes it's important to modify the command so that you can use it in the way you want, and then it's also important to remember to make that modification. There we go. Now it's totally doing all kinds of stuff, and then we could undo that, and that file goes back to the way it was. And I think, based on that, because of the way this works, maybe this to-do doesn't technically matter anymore, because if we were to save this file as, whoops, crypt test2.txt, then this one doesn't change anymore because the save command rechanged the name that was actually put there. So now this one's actually opening another thing. And just for our own edification here, I might also say self.view.window.openFile cryptid name, just so that part's a little easier to do. And we'll go ahead and turn on the word wrap there. There we go. So every time you save one of these things, it'll reopen the file. Nice. Okay, so now we have the ability to, that still can't be encrypted because it's already encrypted. As a matter of fact, we could even make that a little bit smarter. This could not have a caption at all, like this. In which case, that's just going to say the name of the command that's in place. But, and here it says the name of the command. Make sure not to pick it or something untoward might happen. But what we can actually do is add a def description. Self password is none and force is false. And what do we want to say here? We need to know if this is actually enabled or not. If self dot is enabled, password force. Oh, actually, we could say return encrypt file if self is enabled, else already encrypted. And that's like a long thing, but you know how this thing goes. So now in this file, I did not do that correctly, huh? Oh, all right, because I capitalized the thing I should not have capitalized. There we go. That says it's already encrypted. That's why you can't encrypt that one. And this one says encrypt file. So that's good. Now we're going to find there's another problem with that. And that is if the thing doesn't have a file name, it says it's already encrypted, even though technically it's not. So I guess that's one other thing to handle here. We could, I guess, say the self.view.filename is none. Then return. Oh, actually, ooh. Is none and self dot is enabled, I guess is the way to do that. And force, then return. Again, this is one of those things that's kind of ugly. So this one says already encrypted because it is already encrypted. This one says encrypt file, and I can pick it if I want to because it's not already encrypted. And because this one doesn't have a file name, oh, it still says already encrypted. That's not cool. And oh, sorry, not. There you go. Let's try that again. Okay, this one's already encrypted, so it says already encrypted and it can't do anything. This file is not already encrypted and I could pick it if I wanted to, and this one doesn't have a file, so it's disabled. So encrypt file is still there but disabled to let you know that this doesn't actually apply. Now, is this particular implementation ugly? You bet your bippy. It's probably better to have maybe another method that does this that this thing could call or something along those lines. But again, one of my mantras is make it work, then make it work pretty, then make it pretty. So, it doesn't matter how nice the code looks. If it doesn't actually do what you want it to do, then you sort of wasted some time there. And after refueling with some coffee, what's the next thing to do here? We have the ability to now encrypt files to disk, although perhaps not in the way that this person might technically enjoy. And what we could also do, as a matter of fact, and this is something that's kind of interesting, is say new file relative to the current view, and we'll name it encryptorizer.sublime commands, like this, and save that entry, encrypt this file, and the command name is encrypt, like so. Oh, I think I know why package control is broken, and the author is probably not going to be super happy about it. So, encrypt this file listed there. Encrypt this file not listed here, and encrypted this file not listed here. Fun thing is you could totally encrypt an encrypted file if you wanted some sort of creepy double layer of action. So one phase of this is now complete. We can actually close that and that. I don't think we'll probably want to open those in a minute. So that seems to be doing what we want, right? Let's go ahead and say that we don't actually want prompt command because that's sort of a funky way to pull that off. And I don't think we want a global password, so let's get rid of that too. And the next thing to say is let's close that and reopen it just to reset the mini diffs so that it looks nice. And I might even give this a double click to size that out a little bit because I kind of like that better. And let's turn it off at this point. The next thing I guess we need is the decrypt command. Now, how's our decrypt command going to work? I don't think there necessarily would be a decrypt command per se. Well, I guess there kind of would be. I think this goes to the case that we have here. And for this one, this can't be a view event listener because there's no setting that's going to be set. So class, actually, I guess we might save this crypt save listener, right? And this one could be decrypt load listener. And it's just an event listener, like so. And very quickly, I'm going to quit and restart just because I changed the names of some classes. And as a pro tip, if you change the name of a command class or you change the name of an event listener, when you save, Sublime unloads the plugin and then it reloads the new plugin. And when it reloads the new plugin, it'll notice the new classes and it'll add them, but it doesn't remove the old classes. So the old event listener and the old commands will still be hanging around. And in the best case scenario, that causes you, really no problems at all. And in the worst case scenario, for an event listener, you end up with two event listeners and everything seems to happen twice, and you don't understand why, or other weird things like that happen. Or you could find yourself relying on a command that you renamed, and because the old command is still around until you restart Sublime, attempts to view run command, that command will work for you right up until you quit and restart Sublime, and that command goes away, and then suddenly you're just massively confused that your plugin stopped working, but you don't know why, because it totally worked a second ago and I didn't modify any code. So we like to get rid of that sort of action on the fly. So we're going to say on load for that, and that's going to take a view, and this is the bit where we have to say if view.filename dot ends with crypt, then we know this is a crypt file, right? So what would we actually do here? We'd say view.run command decrypt, like this. Yeah, okay. And we're going to save that. That seems to have worked, right? Yeah. Now we need to modify this decrypt command so it works the same way as this one does, which involves needing an argument that is the password, which if you don't provide it, I'll get rid of that. If you don't provide it, it has to ask you for it. So we'll do that, copy that, and paste that here, and we're going to return just quickly to make sure nothing untoward happens, and we also need an undone here, which will do so, and this time we have to call the decrypt command with the password that we were given. Okay, so now we could say we are decrypting, for example. So that means if I was to close this file and then reopen it, the crypted file is opened as per normal, and now it says enter password. And the password that we would use here is, say, the one we picked, so we choose it, and now it says we are decrypting, right? Now, how do we want this to work? We do need to grab the content of the file and do this thing, and I'm going to go ahead and assume that we probably need to do this before something funky happens there in just a minute. We know if we have this file and we choose to encrypt it like this, that it's going to create a file on disk and set those settings. And then as long as we work on this particular file, every time we save it, because we've already given it a password and we've already given it a file name, it'll go ahead and just re-encrypt it every time we save, which is, a nice thing to do. We could even add a status message in there, as a matter of fact. So that's something. But if you loaded one of these files, what do you want to have happen? You're going to see the crypted content. There's not really any way around that per se, which is potentially unfortunate. Well, I guess there might actually be a way around that. I'm thinking here that what we want to do is, in response to this file opening, as it just did there, when we do that, we get prompted with the password. And if we choose the password, the decrypt happens, and the decrypt happens by creating a new tab with the name of the file that was decrypted, if you will. And we need to set that thing up the same as we set this one up. So let's sort of work on this in stages by leaving this file still here. So what actually is happening here And actually, instead of this, let's just go ahead and print plain text like so. So if we close this and reopen the file, we're asked for a password. I'm going to choose the same default password, which is 2. And if we look in the console, we can see our original decrypted content is there, which is what we want. And if we close that and say we change this password to like 3, then we end up with, crap. So that's probably what you want, right? I would imagine. Now, so that part is definitely working. We can definitely decrypt this. Now, let's say instead of replacing the content there, what we do is say view equals self.window.new file. And this is where it kind of starts to get a little bit tricky. I think that's the thing for that, right? Yeah. You can provide it a syntax. So we might say syntax equals self.view.settings.get syntax like this. So we get, okay, we'll say, yeah, end view for new view. There we go. We've created a new view in this window that represents the actual unencrypted content of the file. And the first thing we're going to do there is say enview dot run command append, and we're going to append characters, and the characters we're going to append are plain text like this. So just as that, we should end up with theoretically nothing. What did I do wrong there? Decrypt command has no attribute window. Oh, whoops. My bad. View dot window. Forgot what it was that I was doing there. Okay, let's try that again. And we now have a new tab that is named for the unencrypted content, or it's got the unencrypted content in it. That's nice. Now, the next thing we need to do, because we don't want that to necessarily happen, is we could also say at this point, there's one thing I got to do here. Append disable tab translation true. We need to add this to this argument, which, realistically only works in this new secret thing. Okay, so let's do this. Now, the reason for that, by the way, is that this is something that's new. It didn't always used to work this way. The append command takes the text that you give it and appends it to the end of whatever view is running the command. But if you have translate tabs to spaces turned on, like I do, for example, when indent using spaces is turned on, then anytime Sublime inserts a physical tab character, it expands it automatically to the appropriate number of spaces. So the issue there would be without this argument, if the original file had physical tabs in it, you had that translate tabs to spaces setting turned off, then when you encrypted the file, it would encrypt the physical tab characters, and then when you decrypt it, it would decrypt the physical tab characters, but expand them to spaces when it appends them to the view. So by setting this setting, we stop that from happening, and that should totally be one of those, so it's purple. And this is something that doesn't exist in current versions, released versions of Sublime. And the only reason I know that that is in the diff package is because as a part of Override Audit and working on creating those patch files, which we did in a stream a few weeks ago, I realized that the unified diff header has physical tab characters that go between the name of the file and the timestamp, and they were being clobbered, which also happens if you use the show unsaved changes thing. There should be physical tabs there. And right now, there are because of the change that we just saw in that diff.py plugin. And I created a pull request in the packages repository to fix that. And then before that happened, this new functionality was added to append. Basically, I modified the code so that it would turn off, translate tabs to spaces, and then turn it back on again so that the tab translation wouldn't happen. But in the interim, the developers just added that argument to make that work. So we don't have to worry about that anymore, but we do want to make sure we do that. And now that that's done, we need to view.close. Yes, we need to say as the last step, self.view.close like this to close the file that was just opened, because we don't really want that sort of thing, right? So if we reopen the file and cancel, then the file stays open. I think that's maybe what we want. I don't know. We'll see. If we open the file and choose to enter a password like so, there is that, and the file that was decrypted goes away. Now the last thing we need to do here is, before we actually do that, is the same stuff that we did here, which is to, whoops, don't turn on numlock. That's not going to go well for anybody. Oh, undent that. Instead of self.view for all of these, we want enview, and the settings should set the cryptid name to self.view.filename. No, it shouldn't. Yeah, it should. Yeah. The encrypted version of the file name is the file that we're currently decrypting. That makes 100% sense. And the password is the password, and you're going to set that status thing as encrypted. And then we might even go so far as to say, no, we'll leave that as for the time being, like so. So with that in place, if we were to reopen that file, it's going to ask us for a password. We choose one, and this file reports as encrypted. We can't encrypt the file. The problem here is it doesn't have a file name, so when you save it, it asks you, right? We're going to fix that in just a second. But otherwise, that seems to do what we might want. So let's close without saving that file. Now, what we actually want here is a version of the encrypted file name, but without that .crypt on the end. And we know that the file name ends with that. So here's that thing where I say x equals Bob. We need to do that, right? Okay, I can never remember how string slices work, but that should be nothing new. So if we were to say to print self.view.filename and then pull off minus len of .crypt, let's say, like this, then when we open this file, choose a password, it comes up with the original name of the file, right? And if that was the original name of the file, then we could say enview.retarget and this, like so. And so I think that means that by opening the encrypted file and, I broke it. Hang on, what did I do? I knew it. Yeah, I moved the cursor away. How about that? Nope, too many. What did I do? File name. One too many. Okay, there we go. We open the file. It's going to ask us for the password. We're going to pick it. And now we end up with a crypt text.txt, like so, which is the file that we had up here, right? Well, I think the issue, such as it is, this file still thinks it's modified from what it is on disk. I think because it has a new line now where it didn't before. This file's already encrypted. Oh, the thing went away. Oh, we're going to have to fix that too. Okay, so let's save this. And here's the file that's down here, right? Okay, I'm going to close. Oh, let's reopen that file for just a second and cancel it. So we can do that. Close that file. We close that without saving. Now, I think what we need is for this file to look like this, so that if we close this and reopen it and choose the password, still ends up looking like it's modified somehow, huh? I wonder why that's the case. That doesn't seem like it should be the case. That's intriguing. Okay, that's back there now, right? I imagine if I save this, okay, that happened. You'll notice that this says that it's encrypted down here. And if I quit Sublime and restart it, it no longer says it's encrypted. That's because status keys don't persist in the session file. So plugin loaded for window in sublime.windows, for view in sublime. In window.views. If view.settings.has underscore encrypted name, then do this. So every time the plugin loads, set that status key in place. So we can see that right now, this thinks it's already encrypted. That's why this is disabled. But the tag isn't there, that little encrypted thing. But now when I quit, I'm going to close that too. When we restart, after the plugins load, I think it should come back unless I screwed that up somehow. Anything? No? Oh, yeah, I totally screwed that up. This is why you should never copy paste, I swear. Okay, but now that I saved it, it's totally there because the plugin reloaded. So whoopah! So that's there. We quit, we restart Sublime, and as soon as the plugin loads, it says it's encrypted. So booyah for that. And we could go ahead and add a third lorem on here, save it. We end up with the new encrypted version of the file, which more or less looks the same right up until the endy bit there. Now I think what the person that asked for this wanted was to, let's get rid of this, not have the crypted file open. I think if we resave, the file is resaved, i.e. re-encrypted. I think the reason why this problem was happening was because the on pre-save listener was not doing what he expected it to be doing for a second there, and then on post save restores it. But yeah, the file is modified for reasons I said at the beginning of the stream. There's no way to clear the modification state of a buffer except by saving it or marking it as a scratch buffer. So when a crypt file is loaded, the ciphertext is displayed in the editor window. How to hide this until the password is entered in the prompt. So yes, what you would need to do here is capture the encrypted text and the name of the file so that it could be carried through the entering of the password. The idea being, as soon as onload triggers and opens the password panel, it closes the file that you were trying to open, which means that you have to have all the information that you were going to get out of the view before you close it, which is the ciphertext and the file name. That information has to be pulled out of the buffer and saved somewhere so that we can close this view, ask the user for a password, and then when onDone is called, do the decrypt. An issue with that is that the view that it's running in will go away. So that might mean that the decrypt command has to be a window command instead, so it doesn't associate with a buffer, which is an untoward state of affairs, all things being equal. What's the good way to handle that little bit of business? Maybe that we could just not, yeah, no, that definitely has to happen. So if we follow this through logically, onload needs to call decrypt because that file name ends with a crypt. Then decrypt needs to ask you for a password before it can do anything. But we also want the buffer to be closed, which does mean that this can't be a text command, because if it was a text command, then closing this view would give a different view the focus, and then when self view run command runs, it's executing the command in the best case scenario in the wrong file, and in the worst case scenario in a view that no longer exists, so nothing happens. So I think this needs to be a window command, and if it's a window command, it's not going to have an edit argument, and we're also going to remove that, and we're going to just save that business. And just for safety's sake, and I don't think it's actually necessary, I'm going to do that. Just check here. Okay, yeah, that's cool. Boop, boop. So what do we want to say? If it's none, now we don't have to say self view window. Now we can say self.window show input panel. But I don't think we want a self.onDone in this operation. Password's always going to be none when this isn't run, because the thing that runs it is the event listener. That's never going to pass it a password, right? So I think that this is going to invoke this command. Oh, and we can't say this either. We need to say view window run command decrypt. So the active view should be the thing. So let's just say print view equals self.window.active view, and active is, let's say, %s and mod for view.file name, and then, oh, well, maybe just return that directly. So when I open this buffer, bound method, oh, maybe if I actually called the method, then we'd know what the file name was instead of knowing that it's a function. That seems like it might be an idea. Let's do that. So that is the, yeah, okay, that's what one would expect it to be. Grandiose. So that is the thing there. So now what we're gonna do is take this and put it up here. And all the places where there's a self.view here need to be, that's the only two, right? Just a view. We're going to take the view and we're going to say file name equals view.file name, like that, which is what this thing was displaying. So we know that's the correct file name. Then we create a region that spans this entire file, and we grab it and plain text it. Perfect, because we're going to need that no matter what, right? I think that is the magic of that whole operation. And then we're going to have to, let's see. We got the plain text. If the password is none, we're going to do this. Otherwise, we're going to proceed to this part, right? So I think all that part should sort of be the same. We don't want to say self view new window. It's going to be a window. New view, ask our window to create a new file with, oh, we have to catch the syntax too. Okay. Syntax equals view dot settings dot get. Yeah. Syntax. So now we can remove, whoops. Oh, that was way more than I expected. There we go. Da, da, da. Syntax, that bad boy, like so. So we're going to ask the window for this command to create a new file. And then we're going to ask that view to append the plain text characters. And then we're going to set the crypted name to be the saved file name, which is file name. And it should have the same password as this. It should have that setting. We're going to retarget this view so that it thinks it's going to the file name we saved. We don't need to do this part here because we're going to do it up here instead. With all of that information captured, we're going to say view close. As a matter of fact, we might even do it here, just so we know. On entry to the command, capture the active view, get its file name, get its syntax, get its entire context, and decrypt it. Then close that file. Now, if there is a password, it's going to continue on to create a new view, append the plain text characters in, give it the name that it had before, give it the password that was used, set up the status key, retarget it so that it knows it should be the file that exists on disk, and all is good. But if there's not a password, then we're going to show the input panel. And I think we need to say on done here like this. And it's going to get as an argument the password, right? I guess this means this this command, just move this up here real quick, like, and get rid of that. And we don't need this undone in here anymore because that is not going to be invoked from here. But this command is going to need more arguments, which is mildly unfortunate, I suppose. And what does it need to carry across again? It needs to carry across the syntax and the text. All right, and the name. Okay. File name, syntax, none, text is none, like so. Okay. We don't really care what any of those are. So we're going to ask our window to run the command decrypt, and we're going to give it the password that the user entered, and we're going to tell it that the file name of the file that was originally decrypted is the file name. And we're going to tell it that the syntax of the file is the syntax that we grabbed, and we're going to tell it that the text of the file is the text that we grabbed. Now we run into this issue where we're totally capturing a thing that maybe we don't necessarily need. So this should be, I think that would be the magic of that. And we might even be able to, oops, fit this on one line now. Nope, not quite. Okay, we'll leave that back to the way it was then. Okay, now we have an issue because sometimes when you run this, it has an active view and sometimes it doesn't. So, and that's totally clobbering that stuff over, isn't it? So I suppose we need to say if file name is none, then do this. Is that going to work? If you run this command and it doesn't have a file name, which it wouldn't because it's being invoked by the event listener, then it'll get the active view, get the file name of the view, get the syntax of the view, capture all of its text and decrypt it and close it, and then continue on. And if it does have a file name argument passed, then it'll also have a syntax and it'll have a text, so those values will still be set to something, and it doesn't matter. If password is none, we prompt for the password and re-invoke ourselves with all the stuff that we saved. All right, in the world of the conclusively scary, I think that might actually do something. So the only thing to do is to try to open a file and see how bad it explodes. Okay, well that didn't work so good. Look, man, did I not already like do a thing with this thing or what, man? Okay, for our purposes here, let's just do this. And we'll worry about that in a second, because it's more important to me to know if that part actually does something than the other part. Okay, so now we reopen that file. It has closed. That buffer is gone now. And then we're going to provide a password and hit enter. And we end up with something else blowing up. Oh, local variable plain text reference before assignment. Really? Oh, I guess I should probably should have named this correctly. Maybe that would solve the problem. Let's see. Oh crap. Now I suppose. Yeah, the same bug haunts me, a lot. I tell you what. Okay, now it's broken. Well, reference before. Oh, right. I guess this and this should both be text. I guess I fixed that in the wrong direction. That should be there, and this should look like this. Yeah, the text argument is what comes in. That's what gets sent there. That's what gets passed to the command. That's what this thing uses. Okay, I think that might be a thing. Let's try that. Okay, now except for the pack where the file name is broken, because I broke that part too. File name is not defined. Are you sure? Just because I spelled it wrong, it's not defined? Does that seem correct to anybody? Let's close that. Don't save that. Thank you very much. Crypt test 2 and decoded. All right. Well, that appears to have not exploded, so all we got to do is figure out what the heck is wrong with this bit now. Okay. And yeah, that totally blows up. So int argument must be a string. What the hell is it if it's not a string? Oh, haha. Oh, crap on a cracker. I totally glossed over that one, didn't I? Yeah. Surely it can't grab the text out of the buffer and decrypt it if it doesn't have the actual password yet, right? So maybe we might say that this is the text and this is the plain text. And we might cut this line and bring it down here and paste it here and then use that in the append call so that we actually have the password before we decrypt the file instead of after. Yeah. You got that, Ashwin. That's like the deal here. So I think that is the problem. We can't decrypt it until we get the password, and this was trying to capture it and get all of the text for inserting right away. As an added benefit, that means that the text you're passing around in there is the encrypted text, so that's nice. So if I close that and reopen it, it's going to ask for a password. I pick it, and oh no. Ciphertext is not defined. Oh, right. Variable names, they're important. Okay. Open. There we go. That's pretty cool. Except for the part where it still thinks this file is modified, which is kind of weird. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it says it's encrypted. So I think if I was to say stuff here and save this, the file up at the top changes. So that's nice. And if I save this one, I have to put the password in again. All right, that may or may not be a thing. How did I end up with the second copy of that? Let's close that without saving. Okay. Save. I think that might be doing something a little funky. Does anyone remember that part working previously? Oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that thing that I was doing before. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. That opening the encrypted file causes it to immediately try to decrypt it. Yeah, okay. I can see how that would be a problem. Let's quit this and restart it all up. Okay, well, here's the file. This should have a password. I think there's another issue with this, and that is that this thing knows what the password is because we set it in a setting, but the command doesn't know about it because I reloaded the plugin, so it asks for the password again sometimes, perhaps. Oh, no, okay, no, I think that might not, in fact, be the case. Cool. So that is totally saving that file. Now it gets kind of tricky. It's now impossible to load a .crypt file without something funky going on. Watch what happens if I put the wrong password in. Ooh, boy, that's totally not the thing you want, right? Okay. So I guess the last thing to ponder here, and wow, this took roughly 2 hours. I'll be jiggered if that is not the case. Um, the the thing that gets created when the encrypted file is opened is a file that's marked as, yeah, I think it's a good idea to try and detect if the password is incorrect. That's a good point, Ashwin. This guy didn't his question was very open-ended around that. I think you'd probably want to you have to have some part of the encrypted data that has something that you could encrypt with it so that when you decrypt it, you know that it worked, right? And in that case, I'm not sure what you would actually do. Mm, yeah, at the very least, tell someone. The last issue with this per se is that what it's doing here is creating a new buffer and then appending the text, and that's making it appear as if this buffer is modified, even though technically it's not modified, right? And that there's no way around that except for that thing that I mentioned uh, at the beginning of the stream, which is you save this buffer or you mark it as a scratch buffer. And that's probably the best that it can do. The other issue with it, technically speaking, is that if you undo, you can undo it back to a state where it doesn't exist. Potential ways around that involve, instead of creating the view and appending the text into it, it could create the file on disk and write it there and then tell Sublime to open that file, right? That's probably a better way to do it, but that totally requires that you know that the password is correct, or you end up clobbering over your existing file with, in an unfortunate fashion. Still, the guy didn't ask for that. He wanted to know why his plugin wasn't working. So at some level, that's sort of outside of the scope of what we're working on here. I'm going to close that without saving. So maybe that is actually a thing that we could do here, right? Yeah. We get the plain text. Then we don't need to do that sort of thing, and we don't need to retarget it. We just need to open the file after we're done and set in the appropriate stuff, right? So we might try and accept. Darn, not again. Okay. And what might we say here? With open, oh shoot, need this part first. The name of the actual file is this thing. We probably want to capture that into a thing. Decrypted equals that file name with open decrypted as text. That's what I did for the other thing, right? Yeah, I don't think you need to specify read there. You probably don't need to specify. I guess you probably need to do. Yeah, okay. Oh, actually, no, I'm not reading that. I'm still writing it. What the hell am I talking about? Handle.write plain text. And then once that's done, we say that thing that we did previously, self.window.open file. That was the thing we did, right? Yeah. Pass it a file name. The file name to pass it is decrypted. It's going to return the view. So nView is equal to that. That takes care of this part for us. And then we can put that part in place, and we don't need to retarget the view because we just opened the thing. Okay, so, and it should, I think, jump the focus up to here, and we'll see that same file there because I'm going to reopen this version of the file and go like so. And there we go. So yeah, so if I was to close that one, reopen, we end up with that. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Shouldn't it have? Oh, right, that's the file I just closed. Right, okay. Let's test it with this one. If I close that file and reopen it, it's going to ask for a password. Does it not have the focus? Huh. That's interesting. That may be outside of the scope here. And there's our original file. And more stuff goes here. And we can save it. And presumably it's also encrypting some stuff in there. And then if we were to go to open recent and pick, whoops, oh, come on, mouse, don't be that way. The encrypted file, it asks us for a password. And there we go, right on. And then we could save this and it's going to keep going, right? So that's kind of nice. The next thing to say is that every time we do this, we should say self.view.window.status message. And is this the one that's deprecated? One of these is deprecated and one is not. Sublime status message is deprecated in favor of Windows status message. Go me. Okay. And the message would be encrypting data to something, let's say. And then we'll add some encrypted name to that. Okay, so now we should be able to see, every time I save this in the status line, you should see a message saying that it's encrypting a thing. And, oh, maybe that gets in the way of that whole saved business. That is an unfortunate turn of events. Sublime.set timeout. Timeout first or last? Timeout first. Okay. And lambda to this. Just to test this and see. Let's say like so. Okay. Save this file. Encrypting data to. Boop. That's nice. Maybe we don't even need a big timeout like that. It might be enough to do it that way. Because there we go. Yeah. It just needs to override the fact that Sublime is using status message internally to tell you that it saved a file, to tell you that it's encrypting data. Oh, for the love of Pete. I never claimed to be a good speller. So there we go. Now we say that. Encrypting data to boop. That's working nice. Now, I'm using finger quotes around working nice because, clearly there's error checking that needs to be happening in this little proof of concept bit of business here. It should be checking that these file names don't already exist and something along those lines. Let's say when we encrypt this thing, we get the plain text and we add encrypt plus this to the text, okay? So every time we save this, it's encrypting the data to that particular state. So I'm going to close that. And if I was to reopen, this version, we enter the password, that we were asked for, and we end up with the word encrypt janked onto the front, right? So then we come down to the decrypty bit here, and we do this, and we say if plain text dot starts with encrypt, then we need to throw away the first part of that thing, and this is where if X is Bob and we want just the first character, we want to throw the first one characters off. We do that, right? Yeah, okay. I always have to go to the console to do that because I never remember. Then plain text is equal to plain, and there's probably a way to do this. Len encrypt like this. Else return Sublime dot. Oh, what's that thing called, man? Oh, message dialog. Yeah. Incorrect password. Okay, so here's the theory on how all of this works. And here's a fun thing. At work, we always used to say, "Watch this," right before we wrote after we wrote a bunch of code and before we showed it to anybody, and it always blew up in spectacular fashion. So watch this. We are going to save this file. It says it's encrypting. Then we're going to close that. We're going to give this tab the view. We're going to come up here. We're going to say open recent, the encrypted version. It's going to ask us for a password. I'm going to put 3 in here instead of 2. And it's going to say incorrect password. And that's pretty cool. And if I was to open recent that and put the correct password in, which is 2, then we get the actual content without that thing. So now we can totally detect if the password is broken. The last thing we might want to do here is what happens yeah, okay. If this thing is expecting that the password is a number, then probably we should set it up that way, right? So we might want encrypt command when it captures the password to say try, and I don't know what the coolest way to do this is. Do that. And error message dialog was it called? Password must be a number. Okay, for this particular example. That's going to require us to create a whole new text file, isn't it? Okay. Test file the third. Save it in my home directory as sample3. Like so. Choose to encrypt the file. It's asking for a password. I'm going to use the password Bob. And the password must be a number, so nothing happened. But if I encrypt it with the password 100, it seems to have encrypted the file. The coolest way may be the hardest to read indeed. Yeah, you know, there's probably a cooler way to figure out if a number is an integer than trying to convert it and seeing if it blows up. Technically, this could probably also pass the password as the int version, and then that might actually be a little bit cleverer. If I did this, then the password that it gets is just an int. That probably blows some stuff up, maybe. That would mean, yeah, we're gonna leave the int on this one just in case someone invokes this command with a string. But we could do that, and oh yeah, we got to do the same thing in this decrypt, don't we? Try this. Oh, and I guess it should do this part too, right? No, that wasn't part of that thing. That was part of this thing. This is just the command re-invoking itself. Right. Okay. Like so. Okay, that seems neat. We need to find one of those files so that we can open it and see what happens. So if we open a file that is crypted and use the password Bob, password must be a number and nothing happens. That's neat. And if we said to open recent the encrypted file and use the default password, whoops, shoot. Use the default password without pushing backspace, we get the file. All right, that seems like it's doing a thing. Is it doing the thing that guy wanted to do? Sorta. Is it doing it in a way that was the way he was doing it? No. I don't know if that's necessarily a problem. Sometimes you have to find a middle ground between the thing you want to do and the thing you can do. And I think it makes for a nice user experience for something like this, to know that you can just open a file and you could encrypt it if you wanted to, and then it would just sort of keep encrypting that file in the background every time you save. I guess an issue with this is this does leave the original file sitting on disk along with an encrypted one. There's not really a good way around that though. But this is like a nice starting point for how the logic for something like this might work after it was all cleaned up, to warn you about file names that already exist when you're about to write things and things of that nature. So yeah, that's not too shabby. Certainly, for my own purposes, using the glib or the zlib encoder to open and resave files, I am totally cool with this. And another thing that this could actually do is, when you're opening an encrypted file, it could save the the decrypted file to the temporary directory and delete it when you close the tab, and then you can still edit that file and know that the other one is updating along with it. That might be a nice way to go with that too. But I think we're kind of out of time. We have hit the 2-hour limit, and it is time for me to do dishes and go to bed. I think. I'm not sure. I had a thought of one other thing that could be added to this, but now I can't remember what it was. What was the last thing I was going to stick in here? Is it worth it to be able to change the password? that's something that could be interesting too. You could create a change password command that's only enabled when the view has the setting crypted name and crypt password, and it could ask you for a password the same way as this stuff does. Um, the other thing to do is some refactoring in here, like how this invokes getting a password is the same there as it is here. Uh, for this line here. So realistically, that could be a nice method. Yeah, the temp file module has ways of creating temporary files. Um, I've used that in the past for. Oh, I wonder if I have this actually set up. Let's see. If I did an override report, let's say. Really, I have an override on that, do I? If I picked this and diffed this, we could see that the difference between my version of this default thing and that one is that I added that line, right? Which makes the replace expression in here have syntax highlighting. But if I was to pick this and choose open diff externally, it's going to open in this new window where this is the default file and this is my local file. And I created this file as a, oh, sorry, I created a temporary file for this thing. We can see the name there, and then I have to remember to delete that thing when I'm done. The thing about the temporary file module is it can give you, I think the securest way to do it is to get it to create a file for you on disk and give you the handle, and you don't know what the name is, and then there's no race conditions. Um, but if you need to know the name of the file to do something else with it, that seemed to be problematic. At least back when I was filling with this, which was a little while ago. So I just came up with, give me, use the other version to create a file name based on a template, and then when this command finishes and that view goes away, I know that it's okay for me to delete the file. So that is a way that this could happen, because I think failing this decrypted version of the file after you open it being an actual file on disk, or having the crypted version of the file be the only one on disk and not having this, you have to play weird games with having this view be set as scratch so that it doesn't mark itself as being modified, and then every time you save, that flag would go away, and you need an event handler to know that you made a modification. So now the tab should look like it's modified. So remove the set scratch functionality so that it goes back to that. And then you have to monitor when someone's undoing to undo back to the state before the thing where the file was actually, the text was appended, so that you can stop all further undos from that point, and also move the file back to being scratch. And it's doing a whole lot of work to sort of mimic how Sublime would work with the file, because Sublime doesn't have the API for, no, you just go ahead and pretend that this buffer is clean now. It can only happen by running the save command. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there in how you might want it to work, but I think this actually works pretty good. Yeah, definitely some cleanup, but there's always room for cleanup in a thing. This is definitely somewhat longer than the simple version that existed here in this thing when we started, but we do have a lot more functionality now. I'm not entirely sure if this is actually something that would answer this person's question. I can certainly tell them how to hide the thing until the password is entered. We know how to do that. And we kind of know how to do that. So yeah, I guess I could probably answer this with the thing that we have, and it's up to that guy. Oh, the uncrypted file was changed. Did I actually mean to say that? Yeah. We'll do that. We'll even remove that out of there. We know it's working now. We don't need to spam the crap out of our console. I think that would work, and I think that is going to be the end of this week's live stream. Now, remember, starting December 1st is Devember, so there may be live streams for an hour a night every night through December, assuming I don't get horribly sick like I did last year. Or there might not. I still haven't decided what my Devember project is going to be. And it might be something that it's just going to be too boring to want to anybody to want to watch, watching me read all about the YouTube API or something. I tend to prefer projects where I know going in, not maybe not necessarily how everything is going to be solved, but the sort of the overview of how I could accomplish the thing, and then I just do things sort of piecemeal, one bit at a time. Uh, so if I can't think of a cool package, then I might not live stream it. I might still do video devlogs instead of written devlogs because it was certainly nice to not have to type stuff last year in favor of just standing in front of the camera and throwing a video up with minimal editing. So we'll see how that goes. But remember, even if there's not live streams through this December, you can always look at the videos from last year's November project if you're interested in a build system that you can use to execute build commands on a remote system using a plugin in Sublime Text. Oh, thank you very much, Ashwin. This is sort of, yeah, I like the part of the reason why I decided I wanted to do live streams was because I can very easily get caught up in just answering people's questions on the forum or answering questions on Stack Overflow or investigating, fun little tidbits, and I was having a hard time actually doing any work on my actual package. So I thought if I did live streams of myself working on my actual packages, then I'm holding myself accountable and something actually has to happen, and I'm definitely scheduling time. Um, but yeah, this is also sort of part of the practice of thinking of. I have a very large uh, outline of all of the topics for plugin and package development. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's all of the items. It's just a ton of items on the plugin front. What a window is, what a view is, what the difference is between a text command, a window command, and an application command. What the difference is between an event listener and a view event listener, which we kind of see here. Event listeners trigger for every view, and view event listeners only trigger on views that have specific settings that you specify, which makes things a little nicer in some cases, and things of that nature. And I wanted some practice in talking about that sort of thing. So if you're interested in that, then you definitely want to be subscribed to my other channel, whose link should be down in the description of all of these things, assuming I've done this correctly. And sometime the next year, early in the year, I think videos on the channel are going to switch over to being more plugin development because I think I've covered a lot of the most common questions that people have when they're just new to Sublime in general, like how build systems work and how to put a plugin in place and how key bindings work and things like that. So I think the bulk of the videos are all going to be about how to get a handle on plugins and describing how all of that stuff works. And that might mean less of the other videos, and I might be able to do it in a way where I get two videos out a week, one regular quick tutorial and one in plugin development. It's really hard to say. I'm going to have to sort of wait and see what shakes out there because I don't have a ton of extra time to be doing stuff. But it's good to know that there'll be at least one person who's interested in those plugin development videos. And do remember, you can always ask questions in the live stream. And assuming I notice that someone is actually saying something in the chat, I will definitely answer your question for you. Um, But with that, we're going to call this one quits for now. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and watch the channel to see when the next thing is going to be scheduled. I'm going to definitely schedule the next one to be January 1st, and then sometime between now and December 1st, if I decide on something that's going to be live streamed, I will update the schedule for that accordingly. And you can also don't forget to follow me on Twitter at OdatNurd. Like so, I only have the one thing. I'm probably going to be tweeting about what my November project is there, and I also tweet out every day the devlog. However, that's going to work out as well. And you can keep abreast of how all of that stuff is going. So until the next live stream or until the next video on the other channel, this is OdatNurd saying thanks so much for watching and have a sublime day.